My baby girl Sophie said she was getting engaged. Thomas and I didn't quite know what to feel. Joy, of course. Our baby girl, the one we'd raised for 30 years, was finally about to build a life of her own. But there was sorrow too, a kind of quiet ache, like someone had scooped out a piece of your chest, left it hollow and tender. That weekend she asked us to come along to see the place they were thinking of buying together. We assumed it would be a small get-together, just the four of us. Sophie, her fiancé Jason, and us two tagging along. But the moment we stepped into the glittering Berkeley Hill Estates sales center, my smile faltered. It was packed, bustling like a Saturday morning at Costco. Jason's side of the family had shown up in full force, like it was some kind of pre-planned inspection party. His parents, Rhonda and George, were there, all smiles and business. His kid brother Tyler, still in college with acne dotting his chin, tagged along too. It didn't feel like house hunting. It felt like a board meeting. And it got worse. The layout we'd spent days helping Sophie choose, narrowing it down from a dozen different listings, was picked apart the moment we arrived. The living room was too narrow. The balcony didn't face the right direction. That was the polite part. Then came suggestions to open up the walls, rework the bedrooms, even maybe give Tyler a room in case he wants to crash during school breaks. In what was supposed to be Sophie and Jason's future home. I watched as the glow on Sophie's face dimmed with every comment. The spark she'd had, that little glimmer of excitement, gone, doused like a campfire under a bucket of ice water. She stopped cold. Took a breath. Her voice was calm, but it sliced like glass. I'm here to start a marriage. Not to fund a rescue mission. She didn't wait for a response. She grabbed Thomas's hand in one and mine in the other, and walked out without a single glance back. Her heels echoed against the polished marble floor with such clarity, it sounded like the closing bell of a one-sided war. Was there even a wedding left to plan? Or maybe, just maybe, the moment Jason's entire family swept in like they were claiming territory, the nature of this engagement had already shifted into something else entirely. That morning had started off so beautifully. Sunlight spilled through the slats in the curtains, shimmering on the hardwood like little drops of gold. And then the phone rang. Mom. Dad. Get up. Sophie's voice was bubbling with excitement. Jason and I found a few places. We've got some great options. The weather's perfect today. Come with us and help pick one. She was practically buzzing on the other end, chattering on about her dream home. A plush sofa in the living room, herbs growing on a sunlit balcony, an open kitchen where she could host little dinner parties. I listened and smiled, glancing over at Thomas. And suddenly all the emotions hit at once. Our little girl was really growing up. Just like that, she was getting ready to leave the nest, stepping into a world she would build on her own. We'd already set aside part of our savings to help with the down payment. Our way of making sure she'd start this next chapter with a bit more ease than we ever had. We didn't want much. Just for her to be safe, stable, happy. Okay, sweetheart, I said, still smiling into the phone. Just send us the address. But as I hung up, I realized, my heart was thumping, nervous like a rabbit's. Because something told me, this wasn't going to be the kind of day we'd imagined. After the call, Thomas handed me a cup of coffee without saying a word. I took it, letting the warmth seep into my palms. I opened my mouth to speak, but whatever I was going to say caught in my throat and stayed there. Eventually I whispered, Thomas, do you think Jason is reliable? Thomas let out a slow sigh. He's always been the quiet, steady type, but even he looked a little unsure this time. He seems like a decent guy, he said after a moment. Steady job. Polite. But. He paused again, weighing whether to continue. He's soft. Too agreeable. Doesn't know how to say no. I worry he won't know when to draw the line. I nodded slowly. That had been my concern too. Marriage isn't just about two people being in love. It's about two families, two sets of values, two notions of boundaries. We should talk to Sophie today, I murmured. Buying a house isn't a small thing. It's the beginning of how they'll build their life together. She needs to set the tone. She can't be the one compromising all the time. Exactly, Thomas said. We're here to support her, sure, but someone's got to guard the gate. Raising a child is like holding down a launch button. You want them to shoot for the stars, but you're terrified they'll crash and burn before they even clear the ground. Just before we left, I couldn't help myself. I called Sophie again. Sophie, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice light. Quick question. Will Jason's parents be joining us to see the house? Have they shared any strong opinions? She laughed on the other end, easy and breezy. His parents? Oh no, Mom. Jason said they're swamped lately. They don't want to meddle. Said this is our decision to make. And just like that, the knot in my stomach loosened a little. That's how it should be. Choosing a home should be the couple's choice. Hearing that Jason's parents knew how to respect boundaries actually gave me more hope for the marriage. Thomas and I arrived at the sales center a little ahead of schedule. The location was good, quiet but not remote. The grounds were landscaped to perfection with tree-lined walkways and sculpted hedges that whispered money without screaming it. Inside, the lobby gleamed like a showroom. Chandeliers sparkled like diamonds overhead, and the air was thick with that strange upscale scent, something between luxury candles, fresh carpet, and expensive wood. It smelled like aspiration. The sales agent greeted us in a sharp blazer and bright lipstick, all polished professionalism and real estate charm. She led us to the scale model, explaining every unit in detail. Thomas and I nodded as we listened, almost unconsciously beginning to picture Sophie and Jason's life there. A cozy home. Children's laughter. Weeknight dinners. Shared toothbrush cups. Changing light bulbs. Little arguments. Making up again. This layout's nice, Thomas said, pointing to a south-facing model. Great light. I like this one too, I added. It's just the right size, not too big, not too cramped. Enough space for a future kid or two. For a moment I actually believed this would go smoothly. That knowing how to respect boundaries had become a given. Something baked into modern adulthood. But some people, it turns out, are still clinging to an old script. The kind where a son's new home becomes a family stronghold. Where the so-called starter home becomes a generational bunker, staged for a decade-long domestic soap opera. Not long after, Sophie and Jason walked in hand. She looked radiant, like she'd walked straight out of a bridal magazine. A pale blue dress tailored just right. Hair swept up in a neat chignon. Confident. Elegant. Absolutely glowing. She had her arm tucked through Jason's as they whispered and smiled to each other, all sweetness and soft grins. They looked like a couple just beginning a fairy tale. They had no idea a reality check was waiting just a few steps ahead. Jason looked sharp that day too. Crisp white shirt, navy slacks, hair combed back just right. As soon as he spotted us, he strode over with a bright smile. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds. You made it. We just got here, I replied warmly. Looking at the two of them standing there, Sophie radiant in her blue dress, Jason looking every bit the clean-cut young man, I genuinely felt pleased. They looked perfect together. The kind of couple you'd see on a wedding magazine cover. Beautiful, poised, meant to be. After a bit of small talk, the sales agent beckoned us toward the model units for a tour. And that's when it happened. The rotating glass doors at the entrance spun open, and in swept an entire crowd. Leading the charge were two middle-aged people who looked unmistakably like Jason's parents, Rhonda and George Walker. Jason's features were written all over them. George strutted in with his hands clasped behind his back, stomach puffed out, chin lifted like a man used to being in charge. Rhonda barely had one foot in the door before her voice rang out like a siren. "Tao, this is nice. Way fancier than the sales office we saw last month. Looks like a damn mansion in here." Trailing behind them was a gangly young guy in wrinkled sweatpants and scuffed-up sneakers, smacking gum and sauntering like he thought he was headed for a pickup game, not a real estate appointment. That would be Tyler, Jason's little brother. College freshman, acne-glazed, all slouch and swagger. I froze. Weren't they supposed to be too busy to come? This was not what not getting involved looked like. My eyes darted to Jason. His smile had frozen mid-air. He looked visibly flustered, his jaw tight, his eyes darting everywhere but ours. The smile still clung to his face, but now it looked forced, almost panicked. Sophie's expression changed too. The sparkle she'd been carrying just moments ago dimmed. Her mouth was still shaped in a smile, but it had gone still, brittle, tinged with a quiet confusion and something else, disappointment. And right then something heavy settled in my chest. This didn't feel like a family here to witness their son's milestone. It felt like a delegation, a fully mobilized task force with marching orders. And the money we'd planned to offer toward the down payment? In their eyes, I suspected that wasn't a gift. It was a resource to be negotiated, distributed, and ultimately absorbed. Rhonda, for her part, didn't so much as glance in our direction. She made a beeline straight for the scale model and immediately began peppering the sales rep with rapid-fire questions. What's the asking price on this one? Is there a pool here? What's the monthly HOA? Are there good restaurants nearby? What about parking? Her voice was so loud, it overpowered the soft instrumental music piping through the speakers, drawing side eyes from every couple in the room. She acted like she was the bride. The spotlight followed her around whether it wanted to or not. George didn't say a word, but he paced the room like he owned it, stopping, peering, frowning, nodding at random like a retired general inspecting a new post. His face wore that unmistakable, "I'm too important for this" expression. And then there was Tyler. He wasn't even pretending to take this seriously. He pointed to the biggest, most expensive unit in the entire model and shouted across the room. "Jason, this one's huge. Let's go with this. Perfect for me to crash when I come back on break. Call dibs on the room with the big balcony, okay?" Jason flushed. His face turned red, then pale, then red again. He let out a weak, apologetic laugh. "Oh, well, we're still looking, haven't decided anything yet." His voice was soft, spineless, like a tissue in a rainstorm. Sophie's face had gone pale with fury. Her brows were tightly drawn, lips pressed into a hard line. She hadn't said a word, but her entire body radiated a quiet, seething tension, like someone holding back a storm by sheer will. I was boiling inside too. But we were supposed to be future in-laws after all. Blowing up in the middle of a model home tour? That would be tearing the curtain right off the stage. So I swallowed my frustration and forced a smile, stepping forward to smooth things over. "Well, Rhonda, George, what a surprise. Fancy running into you here." Rhonda finally turned to acknowledge us, giving me a long once-over before delivering a slow, syrupy smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course we came," she said with a mock gasp. "This is our precious son's wedding after all. We're his parents. If we didn't show up, people might think we don't care. Unlike some folks, who sure know how to stay hands-off." That "some folks" dropped like a rusty nail straight into my smile, sharp and passive-aggressive and aimed with precision. My grin froze. So now arriving early made us inattentive? I took a long, steadying breath, clamping down on the rising anger. I kept my face polite, but inside sirens were blaring. They're not here for support, I thought. They're here to take over. This wasn't about choosing a home for Sophie and Jason. It was a land grab, a bold, thinly veiled attempt to stake claim on their future. As the sales rep led us toward the model units, the mood turned awkward, brittle, every step stiff with tension. Rhonda moved through the space like a project manager on a construction site, her eyes scanning every detail with the scrutiny of someone itching to write a bad Yelp review. She walked into the kitchen and instantly cringed. "Oh Lord, this kitchen's tiny. Can't even fit a double-door fridge in here, can you? If I came over and tried to cook a real meal, I wouldn't even be able to turn around." In the living room, she frowned again. "Nope. This layout's all wrong. Afternoon sun won't hit this side at all. Way too dim. Living in a place like this long enough and it'd put anyone in a funk. And this sofa? Please. Where's everyone supposed to sit? The floor." She moved on to the master bedroom, shaking her head the whole time. "This won't do either. Once you squeeze in a proper bed and a wardrobe, there's no walking space left. Buying a house isn't just about saving a few bucks now. You have to think long-term." She rattled off criticisms like she was the one signing the mortgage. Her tone carried the entitlement of someone deciding whether to accept a free house from a distant uncle, not a future mother-in-law weighing in on a home she had no stake in. Then, as if she'd been waiting for the right moment, Rhonda spun on her heel and declared with full-throated certainty, "I think that 4-bedroom we saw earlier is the best option. Yep, the biggest one. Makes the most sense." She locked eyes with Jason and delivered her reasoning like a strategy pitch. "You'll have space for your brother when he's back from college. He won't need a hotel. And if your dad and I ever get sick and need to stay for a bit, it'll be way more convenient. It's just smart planning." She said it all with such conviction, like she was blessing her son with the wisdom of experience. But every convenience she listed carried one clear, ugly message. This house wasn't meant to be Sophie and Jason's sanctuary. It was a Walker family investment. A shared compound. A future stronghold. Sophie had been biting her tongue this whole time. But now she'd had enough. She stopped walking, turned slowly and faced Rhonda head-on. Her voice wasn't loud, but each word landed like a crack of ice in the air. "Mrs. Walker, this is our home. Jason and I are buying it together, with the down payment coming mostly from my parents, and the loan shared between the two of us." She held her gaze, steady and unblinking. "From the beginning we've planned for a 2-bedroom unit. That decision was made based on what we can afford. And only that." Sophie's words landed with a quiet finality, clear, calm and sharp as stone dropped into still water. The ripples spread instantly, sucking all the air out of the room. And then Rhonda exploded. Her eyes went wide and her voice shot up an octave like a cat that just got its tail yanked. "What do you mean, the two of you? Sophie, what are you saying? Once you're married, you're part of our family. You think being our daughter-in-law means we don't get a say?" She was practically yelling now, the words tumbling out rapid fire, her voice bouncing off the walls of the model home like a live taping of Real Housewives. Open House Edition. "And what's wrong with a few extra rooms? We're not strangers. When we're older we might need to stay for a few days. What's the big deal? And of course Jason's brother should have a place. He's family." She finished her tirade with her hands on her hips, chest puffed out like she was about to kick off her shoes and start swinging. The sales agent, bless her heart, looked like she was trying to fuse with the wallpaper, smiling awkwardly while slowly inching away, clearly wondering how fast she could disappear. What Sophie had really said, in the kind of language that modern, emotionally healthy adults understood, was simple. "This is our life. Please respect our boundaries." But Rhonda didn't speak boundary. He came from a world where marriage meant full assimilation. In her eyes, Sophie wasn't entering a partnership. She was joining a territory, and that territory had long-standing, non-negotiable rules. The room dropped several degrees in temperature. The soft ceiling lights that had once made the space feel warm and cozy now glared down like surgical lamps, spotlighting every strained expression, every clenched jaw. Jason stood between them, flushed to the ears. He looked like a crab pulled fresh from a steamer, sweaty, stunned and completely out of his depth. He glanced from his mother to his fiancée and back again, opened his mouth once, twice and couldn't seem to form a single sentence. Then, almost as if trying to disappear into the air, he gently tugged on Sophie's arm. "Sophie, don't be upset, okay?" he said, voice barely above a whisper. "My mom, she talks fast, she doesn't mean anything by it. Let's not fight. We're not in a rush. We can just keep looking. No pressure, right?" His words got softer with every syllable, shrinking backward like he wanted to retreat from the entire moment. It was all there, in his hesitant tone, the apologetic smile, the way he clung to neutrality like a child clings to a blankie. Not courage. Not conviction. Just avoidance. Then finally George, who'd been standing silently like a spectator at a prize fight, cleared his throat. He straightened up and stepped forward, all smiles and folksy charm. "Sophie," he said, "now don't take it the wrong way. Rhonda has a point, that's all. You've got your whole lives ahead of you. Having a few extra rooms just makes things easier. We're family. There's no need to draw such hard lines." His voice was smooth as silk, warm as spring air, every word delivered with the gentle authority of someone pretending to be the peacemaker, but actually just building scaffolding around Rhonda's argument. He wasn't neutral. Not even close. And then Tyler, God help us, jumped in, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "Totally, Sophie. I'm definitely gonna be visiting a lot during breaks. More rooms just make sense, right? I mean, you guys are already buying the place. Might as well hook me up with one. I'll take the one with the balcony, thanks." He said it like the deal was already done. Like the room was his. Like in his head he was already decorating. In the span of 2 minutes the Walkers had locked into formation. Mother, father and golden child little brother, forming an unbreakable front. The conversation had turned into a monologue. The tone unilateral. And suddenly Sophie wasn't the bride-to-be anymore. She was the outsider, the one who had to be reasoned with, persuaded, absorbed. I looked at my daughter, standing tall, shoulders stiff, expression unreadable. She was like an island in a swelling tide of pressure and entitlement, battered by a wave she hadn't invited, a storm she hadn't caused. But still she didn't fold. She stood there, straight-backed and silent, like a lone tree refusing to bend, even as the wind whipped around her. Her eyes were brimming. I could see it, just beneath the lashes, that unmistakable shimmer. It hit me like a gut punch. And when I looked over at Jason, tucked into a corner, doing nothing but muttering half-hearted pleasantries, I felt the anger rise right into my throat. That was the moment I understood everything. This wasn't a house tour. This was an ambush. We thought we were here to talk about a wedding. They came to talk about asset integration. We thought we were helping Sophie build a new home. They came to liquidate the down payment we'd offered, like it was up for grabs. Sophie took a long, slow breath, clearly summoning every ounce of control she had left. She didn't even glance at Rhonda or Tyler again. Her gaze locked straight onto Jason, sharp and unflinching, like she was trying to peel off that harmless nice guy mask and force him to face the coward hiding underneath. Jason, she said, each word deliberate, cold, and terrifyingly calm. Are you seriously telling me that you think we should take on a mortgage we can't afford, just so your brother has a place to crash in the summer, or your parents have a room if they ever feel unwell and decide to stop by for a few days? Her voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the air like a blade, cutting clean through all the fake smiles, polite nods, and let's not make a scene diplomacy. The room went still. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning now, soft, mechanical, the only sound in a space that had gone deathly quiet. Everyone was looking at Jason. His face flushed all the way down to his neck, beads of sweat blooming across his forehead. He opened his mouth, tried to speak, failed. Sophie. My parents, they're just getting older, that's all. They didn't mean anything by it. They were just thinking ahead. Having an extra room might, be practical. He was unraveling, every word weaker than the last, dissolving into excuses that sounded like they'd been used too many times already. But before he could finish, Rhonda pounced again. Like a fuse had finally met flame. Jason, she snapped. You're talking like we're asking for charity. Like we're the ones taking advantage. She turned to Sophie, her voice booming, her posture rigid with offense. You're getting married. What's so strange about buying a house? We didn't say we wouldn't contribute. But the deed? Jason's name has to be on it. That's not negotiable. Her voice rang off the walls, loud enough to startle even the sales consultant, who was now grimacing in the corner, clearly wondering if she'd wandered into a hostage situation. Rhonda paused, as if suddenly realizing she needed to soften the blow, and adjusted her tone like she was performing an act of mercy. Of course, she said with mock generosity. We're not unreasonable people. She cleared her throat and put on her let me sound fair face. Look, the house is your purchase, we get that. But we're willing to chip in for the renovations. Sure. We'll throw in, let's say 20,000. That's our gift to you. Then she smiled like she just offered a blank check. But the name? That has to be on the deed. That's only fair, don't you think? $20,000. The way she said it, you'd think she was offering to pay off half the mortgage. Like that one line on a six-figure deed was something she could buy with a token contribution and a few passive-aggressive blessings. I nearly lost it right then. $20,000. For joint ownership. On our daughter's house. Funded mostly with our savings. She dragged us through floor plans, complained about the layout, insisted her son's younger brother needed his own room, pitched the idea of future convenience visits. And now, after circling the prey long enough, she was going in for the kill. A spot on the title. Sophie went pale. Not the kind of pale you get from shock, but the kind that comes from heartbreak. Real heartbreak. The kind that sinks deep and pulls the warmth right out of you. The kind that makes you realize the person standing next to you might never truly stand up for you. And that's when I snapped. Did they think I was invisible? Just because I'd kept quiet, did they assume I wasn't keeping score? I stepped forward and gently pulled Sophie behind me, like a mother bird shielding her young without a moment's hesitation. Then I looked Rhonda and George straight in the eye. My voice stayed calm, but there was a tautness in it now, sharp and cold like piano wire drawn tight across the air. Rhonda. George. I understand you love your son. I do. I'm a mother too, I get wanting the best for your child. But buying a home isn't something you solve with good intentions and loud opinions. The truth is, we're the ones covering the majority of the down payment. Jason knows that. And from here on out, every mortgage payment is going to come from these two working their tails off month after month. As for whose name goes on the deed, of course, we respect that it's ultimately their decision. But it has to be based on one thing. I paused and let the words land, slow and firm. Fairness. And reason. Rhonda didn't take it in. In fact, it only lit a bigger fire in her eyes. She stiffened, lifting her chin like a rooster crowing victory. Fair and reasonable? What's unreasonable about putting Jason's name on the deed? They're getting married. It's his home too, isn't it? She smacked a hand to her chest like she was about to take an oath. We might not be offering as much, but that $2,000, that's our savings. Hard-earned money, you hear me? We've pinched pennies to get there. Just because we don't have deep pockets doesn't mean we don't have heart. Or do you only care about dollar signs? Then, as if realizing that might not be enough to sway the room, her eyes sparkled with a new, wildly misplaced logic. And what about later, huh? When they have kids, who do you think's gonna help out? And what, our time and labor don't count for anything? We're just supposed to babysit for free while you keep all the equity. I almost laughed. It was so ridiculous it bordered on satire. The baby hasn't even been conceived and she's already using future child care as a bargaining chip for partial home ownership? I gave a soft, sharp laugh and dropped the pleasantries. Babysitting? I said, arching an eyebrow. Rhonda, don't you think that's putting the cart about 10 miles ahead of the horse? We haven't even settled on a floor plan and you're already calculating future labor costs. I took a breath, my voice calm but firm. Legally speaking, funds provided before marriage are considered individual property. And anything paid afterward, mortgage, maintenance, taxes, needs to be split according to who contributes. That's what fairness looks like. You're offering $20,000. And you're asking for Jason to have equal claim to a property we're primarily funding. I met her gaze dead on. You tell me, how's that fair or reasonable? I wasn't yelling. I didn't have to. Because every word hit where it needed to, right on the blueprint of their little scheme. I saw the flicker in Rhonda's eyes, the way her temper flared up like a struck match. George's jaw tensed too, hands tightening behind his back. But I wasn't backing down. This wasn't just about a house. This was about my daughter's future, and the respect she deserved walking into it. Some people have a way of spinning the narrative so far off course you'd think they traveled to Mars and back to justify their entitlement. They contribute a little. That's heartfelt generosity. We contribute a lot. That's just us doing our duty. They struggle financially. That's humble living. We save and help. That's a cue for them to demand more, as if we owe them something. Well, no. My daughter isn't here to run a charity. And we're not here to sink tens of thousands of dollars into someone else's name for the sake of family optics. The tension in the room was thick enough to carve with a knife. Finally, George stepped in trying to play mediator. But the look on his face, the faux weary I hate being in the middle of this expression, was just another layer of cover for the same position. Back Rhonda, back Tyler, hold the line. Ladies, let's all take a breath, he said, raising his hands as if he were breaking up a bar fight. No need to turn this into a misunderstanding. We're all family here. No reason to get worked up over something like a name on a piece of paper. Then he turned to Sophie, voice syrupy, smile gentle, the kind old man act in full swing. Sophie, honey, don't get too caught up in this. Put his name on it. What difference does it make? It'll still be your house. You and Jason together. You're a kind girl. I know you're not the type to get stingy about these things. Don't take it to heart, okay? There it was again. That tired old move, dressing up manipulation in a bow and calling it virtue. You're a good girl. You're not petty. It's not flattery. It's a leash. But George didn't even get to finish his performance before Sophie cut in, her voice cold and clear. By now, there wasn't a trace of hesitation on her face. No softness, no doubt. Just the kind of clarity that only comes when something inside you finally breaks, and you choose to stop patching it back together. Mr. Walker, she said, tone icy and precise, I am a good person. That doesn't mean I don't have boundaries. Her eyes swept across the three familiar yet suddenly strange faces in front of her, before settling on Jason. And when she locked onto him, the look in her eyes could have frozen the air between them. Her voice was calm but unflinching. There are two options for this house, she said. Just two. One, what we originally agreed to, we buy the 2-bedroom. My parents cover most of the down payment. Jason and I split the mortgage. And the deed carries both our names. Or two. Her voice hardened, no emotion left in it. We don't get married. and we reevaluate whether this relationship should continue at all. The room felt like it had been sealed in glass. Time stopped. Even the gentle hum of the recessed ceiling lights suddenly sounded too loud. Rhonda's face shifted like a storm front, red to gray to ghostly white. George just stood there, mouth slightly open as if the words had all flown out of reach. And Jason looked like someone had cracked open the sky and dropped a lightning bolt directly onto his head. His whole body locked up, frozen in place, the terror plain on his face. Sophie had just flipped the table. You want to make the house the battleground? Fine. Let's see what you're really fighting for. The wedding or the walls. Let's see what this love you keep talking about is actually made of. It was a moment of reckoning. The kind that strips away all the polite veneers and reveals exactly who's who and what they're here for. And then, right on cue, Rhonda snapped. The mask shattered. Whatever composure she'd been clinging to evaporated. She erupted like a volcano in stilettos. "Oh my God," she shrieked, voice splitting the air. "You haven't even married into our family yet and you're already throwing us under the bus? What, you think you're better than us? Is that it? Because we're not rich. You think we're trash. You think my Jason, my beautiful, hardworking Jason, isn't good enough for you. You think you're some kind of prize." Her voice cracked, pitched up like broken glass. She was practically stomping holes into the tile floor, jabbing the air like she wanted to tear the room apart with her bare hands. "I'm telling you right now," she screamed, voice echoing off the model kitchen cabinets. "If my son's name isn't on that deed, there is no wedding. None." She was spiraling now, full theater mode, fists balled, chest heaving, on the verge of either a fainting spell or a sit-in. It was like watching a woman collapse into a public tantrum, the kind that leaves bystanders wondering if they should call security or just quietly evacuate. Gone was the poised, self-assured mother-in-law from earlier. What stood there now was someone unhinged, wild-eyed, off-balance, desperate to claw back control of a conversation she had clearly lost. But Sophie didn't even flinch. She didn't turn, didn't respond, didn't blink. Her eyes stayed locked on Jason, the man she'd once trusted, once loved. The man who, in the moment she needed him most, had become the quietest person in the room. Her gaze wasn't pleading anymore. She wasn't hoping for an explanation. She wasn't waiting for him to pick a side. She was demanding an answer. "Jason," she said, voice low but crystal clear, cutting through Rhonda's theatrics like a razor through silk. "What's your decision?" The air thickened again. He could feel it, the shift. The gravity of the moment pressing down on Jason like an anvil. Every eye turned to him. Every ounce of pressure landed squarely on his shoulders. On one side, his mother losing control, loud and relentless. His brother, already planning what kind of gaming setup he'd put in the spare room. On the other, the woman who'd given him every chance. Who had been reasonable, patient, generous. And who now stood at the edge of walking away forever. What would he choose? Deep down, I think I already knew the answer. But in that moment, I still held on to a ridiculous little hope. Maybe, just maybe, he'd surprise us. Maybe for once he'd step forward. Stand tall. Be the man Sophie needed him to be. But reality came back and slapped us hard across the face. Sharp, loud, and unflinching. Jason looked around nervously, then back at Sophie. His face was a mess of guilt and indecision, like a fish flopping helplessly on dry sand, gasping for something that wasn't there. And then he deflated. Like a balloon with a slow leak. Shoulders slumped, head lowered, gaze dodging hers. His voice came out so quiet it barely touched the air. "Sophie, maybe we can just talk about it more later. She's still my mom, you know." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Because the moment he said talk about it more, whatever light had still been holding on in Sophie's eyes snapped out. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper. It was grief. It was finality. Because when a man won't stand up for you, not when it's convenient but when it counts, when he lets your dignity get trampled and answers with excuses and shrugs, that's not kindness. That's not love. That's not a partner. That's weakness. That's avoidance. That's not enough. Sophie didn't say another word. No shouting. No tears. Not even a sigh. She just looked at him. And in that one long look there was everything. Pain. Disappointment. And finally release. Then she turned. Back straight. Chin high. and walked out of that suffocating sales center without so much as a glance behind her. I snapped into motion, grabbing Thomas by the arm and pulling him along. Behind us, Rhonda's screeching hit its highest register, George's murmured apologies fell flat, and Tyler mumbled something about not understanding how this all got so messed up. The sales agent stood stiffly near the reception desk, her smile frozen into something painful and vaguely haunted, like a flight attendant stuck mid-evacuation drill. But us, we walked out. Out of the glass and marble box filled with artificial light and real entitlement. Out of the trap. Out of the nightmare. And outside there it was. Sunlight. Real, bright, forgiving sunlight. It wrapped around us like something we'd forgotten existed. The sky was wide open. The air was crisp and clean. But our hearts were exhausted. We weren't angry anymore. Just wrung out. Like survivors of a storm we never saw coming, grateful we got out before it dragged us under. Sophie. Wait. He came running out after her, breathless, desperation scribbled all over his face. He caught her arm, grabbing like a man trying to stop a moving train. Sophie, don't be mad, just listen to me please, I didn't mean it like that. You have to understand, they're my family. Sophie yanked her arm away without hesitation. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. But it was final. The force of it made Jason stumble back a step. And when she turned around, her voice was like glass, smooth, cool, and unbreakable. Hey, we're done. I thought I was marrying you, a man with a mind of his own who understood boundaries, who could take a stand. But today I realized, I wasn't marrying you. I was marrying your entire family. The expectations, the entitlement, the silence you hide behind. What I want is a partner. Someone who stands next to me, who faces the world with me. Not someone who drags me behind him while I carry the weight of his family on my back. This wedding will not happen. And with that she turned. No more words. No more chances. Not even a glance at the face of the man who had let her down when it mattered most. Sophie turned and walked toward the parking lot, her heels clicking against the pavement with a sharp, deliberate rhythm. Each step sounded like a verdict. This is me, cutting the cord. Sometimes the highest form of wisdom is knowing when to walk away. You can wait in a sinking marriage hoping the storm will pass, the water will recede. Or, you can get out before you're underwater. As for the time, the love, the effort already poured in, don't be foolish. That's not a sunk cost. That's tuition. A failed relationship that exposes the truth about someone, and the family behind them, isn't a loss. It's a lesson. It teaches you about people, about reality, and about just how high the bar should be when it comes to sharing your life with someone. And for that lesson, it was worth every penny. Back home the silence was unbearable. It was like the house had been sealed in a glass jar, tight, stuffy, as if the very air had thickened into something you could slice with a butter knife. Sophie didn't say a word. She walked straight to her room and shut the door behind her with a quiet click, a sound that felt more like a drawbridge being pulled up than a door gently closing. Thomas and I sat in the living room side by side on the couch. We didn't speak. What was there to say? The fruit bowl on the coffee table still looked perfectly arranged. The sunlight still spilled gently through the window, painting golden squares on the hardwood floor. Everything looked normal. But inside, it felt like we just walked out of a tornado, wreckage still clinging to our skin. I ached for my daughter. For the joy she'd carried into that day, only to have it crushed by a family too entitled to see past their own greed, and a man too weak to stop it. But even through that ache, I felt something else. Relief. Thank God it happened before the vows, before the keys changed hands, before the babies came. Because if it had been any later, if she'd married into that parasitic little clan, there would have been no escape. Just a slow descent into emotional bankruptcy. When dinner time came, Sophie finally emerged from her room. Her eyes were red. She'd clearly cried. But the way she moved was different. There was a clarity in her presence now. A stillness. Like the sky after a storm. Calm, yes, but powerful. Not to be disturbed. She sat at the table, picked up her fork and quietly began to eat. Thomas and I exchanged a glance. We wanted to say something. Anything. But how do you comfort someone after they've just saved themselves from the life you couldn't? After a long pause, Sophie set her fork down, lifted her head and looked at us. Her voice was steady. Measured. Like a decision had been made, filed, and signed. Mom. Dad. I'm sorry I put you through that. I've thought it through. I'd rather rip the bandage off now than let the wound fester. Some people, some families, just aren't worth the cost. Then she pulled out her phone, opened her messages, and handed it to us. Take a look at this. On the screen, her last few texts with Jason. Time-stamped from the night before the house tour. Jason, Sophie, about tomorrow, my parents and Tyler might swing by the viewing. Sophie, what? I thought you said they were too busy. Jason, they just decided last minute. They just want to take a look, no big deal. Sophie, did you tell them we're only looking at 2 bedrooms? That my parents are covering most of the down payment. Jason, yeah, I told them. Don't worry, they won't say anything. Sophie scrolled up, her finger quick, purposeful. She stopped at an earlier message. From Rhonda. Rhonda, Jason, we're all going to the showing tomorrow. Me, your dad, your brother. Her side's got money, right? Well, it's time to get something out of it. The house has to be a 4-bedroom. Your name has to be on the deed. If not, no wedding. Your brother needs a room too. Jason, got it, Mom. I'll handle it. So he knew. He knew the whole time. He knew his parents and brother were coming. He knew they weren't just dropping by to look at real estate. They were coming to claim territory. To stake their flags and carve out their share. He wasn't some poor man stuck between 2 worlds trying to please everyone. He was part of it. A willing participant. The so-called nice guy was just a co-conspirator dressed in sheep's clothing. In that moment, whatever shred of grace I'd still held for him shattered completely. This wasn't kindness. It was calculated compliance. This wasn't shyness. It was strategic silence. And it wasn't poor communication. It was intentional deceit. I felt the fury rise in my chest. Molten, suffocating, alive. And deep down I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Sure enough, the campaign began the very next morning. The first wave came bright and early, Rhonda, of course. My phone buzzed with her number. I answered. Linda, sweetheart, she sobbed, voice dripping with theatrical despair. Can't you talk to Sophie? Young people say things they don't mean. We as parents should rise above it. She sniffled into the receiver like she was starring in her own made-for-TV pity party. Jason's lost 2 pounds. He's not eating. And now the whole neighborhood's talking. You have no idea how humiliating this is for our family. I said nothing. Instead, I quietly tapped record. The silence must have unsettled her because her tone turned on a dime. Oh, I see. You people always looked down on us, didn't you? Sophie humiliated us that day. Publicly. You call that being a decent human being? I hung up. Next came George via text. Linda, I know Rhonda got carried away, but we're all parents here. Maybe it's time both sides compromise. Then Tyler in a voice message. Groggy, careless, like he'd just rolled out of bed. Hey Linda. Sorry about my mom, that's just how she is. I think Sophie's cool. I always wanted a big sister. The whole family showed up. All playing their roles. All missing the point. And finally the closing act, Jason himself. He sent Sophie a long message. Paragraphs and paragraphs. He said he'd been sitting at his desk for hours, writing and rewriting, thinking about her, about them. When Sophie read it, she actually laughed. Because every single word was about the past. How good we were. How much I regret what happened. How my mom got carried away. But not a single line said, I'm ready to stand up for you now. That's not love. That's cowardice in cursive. Then came the grand finale. Rhonda showed up at our building. Wearing a blindingly floral t-shirt, holding a basket of flowers like she was auditioning for a neighborhood production of Humble and Harassed. She stood on the sidewalk yelling loud enough for the pigeons to scatter. Sophie, come down and talk to me like an adult. You can't just cut people off like this. Jason's not some toy you toss aside. Sophie folded her arms and smirked. I pulled out my phone. Called 911. Started filming. 3 solid clips of her street corner performance. When she saw me recording, the mask dropped. What the hell are you doing? You're filming me. What, are you trying to ruin us on purpose? I looked her dead in the eye. Whether your family ruins itself or not has nothing to do with me. And like clockwork, Jason arrived. Out of breath. Hair tousled. Eyes wide. Please, he panted, tugging at her arm. Let's just go, okay? Let's not make this worse. But Rhonda turned on him next. Right in front of us all. You want me to shut up? I'm telling the truth. They're treating us like trash because we don't have money. And then finally Sophie spoke. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just looked Jason in the eye and asked one simple question. You're just going to stand there and let her scream at us like this? Jason grimaced. His lips parted. His eyes pleaded. Sophie, she's just upset. Don't take it personally. Just then Sophie stepped out from upstairs. Black t-shirt. Fitted jeans. Hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. No makeup. No smile. Her expression was a blade. She walked past me without a word, then stopped at the top of the porch steps, looking down at Jason and Rhonda as if from a courtroom bench. Her voice was cold, deliberate. Jason, she said. I gave you the dignity of a quiet ending. But showing up here like this, did you really think I was that naive? She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. I have screenshots of everything your mom texted you. Do you want me to read them out loud? Rhonda's face drained of color so fast it was like watching paint stripped from a wall. Her eyes darted like a trapped animal's. You're unbelievable, she hissed. Saving messages? You're the kind of woman who collects evidence? That's terrifying. Sophie didn't even blink. It's not evidence. It's protection. Because people like you change your stories depending on who's listening. Then she turned her gaze to Jason, sharp, focused, surgical. You keep saying you were stuck in the middle. But the truth is, you knew. You knew everything they were planning. And you didn't stop it. You helped them. Her voice was terrifying in its calm. Stop pretending, Jason. I see you now. I've seen you for a while. That single sentence, stop pretending, cut through the last of the Walker family's performance. All masks fell. All excuses dissolved. But the Walkers weren't done yet. The very next day the next act began. The extended family PR tour. First, Jason's aunt posted a sentimental throwback on Facebook. His college graduation photo with a sob story caption. Such a sweet, kind boy. We may never know what mistake turned love into heartbreak. The comments filled up fast, mostly her church friends offering prayers, sympathy, and unsolicited opinions. God bless this boy. The right girl will come along. She must not have deserved him. Later that afternoon, Sophie's best friend sent her a screenshot. Check this out, she wrote. Your ex-future Emil's on the warpath. Rhonda had posted on a local community forum, claiming Sophie was a manipulative, cold-hearted girl who destroyed her son's life and probably had another guy lined up the whole time. The replies were a cesspool of strangers eager to dissect a woman they'd never met. That was it for me. I had wanted to be done. To let it fade. But reading that filth? I texted Sophie one sentence. Get ready. We're taking this to the lawyer. Sophie called in sick the next morning. I drove us to a law firm downtown, recommended by a close friend. Pamela, the attorney, was in her 50s, sharp-eyed behind gold-rimmed glasses, and radiated seasoned confidence. She listened to Sophie's account without interruption. When it was over, she gave a single nod. You did the right thing, she said. Save everything. If they keep this up, we'll send a cease and desist. And if necessary, we sue. Pamela drafted a formal reputation protection notice. She also advised filing for a no-contact order, especially against Rhonda. That woman, she said flatly, has no concept of boundaries. She's skating the edge of harassment. When we stepped back out into the street, Sophie exhaled like she'd just dropped a 20-pound weight. 3 days later, Jason showed up at our door. Big, small, wrinkled t-shirt, bloodshot eyes, shoulders caved in like he was trying to fold into himself. Sophie, he murmured, can I talk to you? Alone. I was about to shut the door in his face, but Sophie held up a hand. It's fine, she said. Let him speak. He sat on the edge of the couch, silent, fidgeting with his hands. It was a long, painful moment before he finally managed to say, My mom went too far. I'm planning to move out. Cut ties. I set my teacup down with a click. So, I said, let me get this straight. You think that if you escape your family, you can just walk back into my daughter's life like nothing happened. Jason flushed. He glanced at me, then turned to Sophie. I want to start over, he whispered. I know I messed up, I don't want to lose you. Sophie didn't say a word. She just reached into her bag, pulled out the drafted cease and desist letter from our lawyer, and handed it to Jason. Jason, she said quietly, this is our formal response to your family's latest campaign. You want to talk about us? That's your choice. But your mother's public attacks, her lies on the internet, that crossed a line. If you're serious about cutting ties, maybe start with deleting those posts and issuing a public apology. Jason's face went slack. He looked like he'd swallowed a stone. His mouth opened, then closed again. No words came out. Finally, he placed the letter on the table, stood up and muttered, I need to think about it. And he walked out. Sophie exhaled as if she'd been holding that breath for weeks. She looked at me and smiled. Not happily, but with a clarity that only comes from seeing something for what it truly is. Mom, she said, I think I finally get it. I kept telling myself he was trying, that he was being pulled in too many directions. But the truth is, he never once stepped forward for me. I reached over and took her hand, gave it a gentle squeeze. My sweet girl, I said, thank God you saw it now. Before your whole life became a slow burn of carrying someone else's burden. That night, Sophie updated her social media status. It was just one sentence. Not everything can be talked through. Some things, the moment you explain, you've already lost. We never saw the Walkers again. Not in person. Not online. Not in our lives. 3 months passed. Spring crept in slowly, warming the air, and in some strange way, Sophie's life too. One morning she sent me a photo. Just a selfie, nothing posed or filtered. She was sitting on the rooftop of an arts center in Brooklyn, New York. Behind her, the city skyline at dusk. On her face, a soft smile, light curling at the corners of her mouth. She'd been selected for a Young Creators in Global Exchange program, nominated by her school to work as a resident designer in New York. Her partner organization? A boutique wedding scenography company based in Manhattan. She wrote in the email, Mom, this is the first time in my life I've been chosen not as someone's fiancé, but simply as me. She was busy. Incredibly so. By day, she bounced between venues and concept meetings. At night, she curled up in a tiny walk-up apartment, sketching sets and adjusting color palettes under the hum of a desk lamp. When we video called, she'd sip coffee and complain about the snow or how her business partner had changed the budget again. But her eyes, they were bright. Not dulled by disappointment. Not weighed down by someone else's silence. She was alive in a way I hadn't seen before. Her latest installation was titled, Boundaries and Freedom. Half of it resembled a wedding altar. The other half, a deconstructed art piece. Bare frames, fractured mirrors, dismantled silhouettes. It told the story of a girl who stopped being someone's anything and became fully, fiercely herself. The exhibit went viral. Bloggers wrote think pieces. One headline read, This is what female awakening looks like. A podcast even reached out and invited her on to talk about her inspiration. She didn't give her full name. She didn't need to. At the end of the episode, she said, Marriage isn't a refuge. It's not a destination. It should never be the trap someone's family uses to claim territory in your life. Wrapped in the language of love. Real partnership is two whole people standing beside each other. Not one person being absorbed into someone else's need. That night I scrolled through the comments. Hundreds of them. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. This is the permission I didn't know I needed. From today on, I'm planning my own solo wedding, to myself. As for Thomas and me, we exhaled. The house settled back into its rhythm. Dinner with the game on in the background. Saturday grocery runs. Little routines we had almost forgotten how to enjoy. Sometimes Sophie would FaceTime us from New York, teaching us how to take better photos or edit short videos. She joked, You two better get ready. I'm turning you into senior influencers. One day she surprised us with a trip to New Orleans. This was supposed to be a thank you trip for my future in-laws, she said, but now, it's just for us. The three of us. On our last evening, she ordered a glass of sparkling wine at a street cafe in the French Quarter. The lights above us twinkled. Music spilled from a brass band on the corner. She raised her glass and said, To the girl who dumped Jason 3 months ago. We burst out laughing and drank every drop of that cold, fizzy celebration. The week after we got home, Sophie received a package in the mail. It was thick, weighty. The envelope had a marble texture, her name written in gold foil. A wedding invitation. From Jason. Inside was a photo of him with a sweet, soft-smiling girl posed in front of a suburban home. The same house we later heard that Rhonda had picked out herself. Sophie stared at it for maybe 2 seconds. Didn't say a word. Then, without a flicker of hesitation, she fed the whole thing into the shredder. Pressed start. And watched the glossy, curated version of happiness get sliced into confetti. I stood beside her, watching that calm, amused look on her face. And suddenly a quote came to mind. Don't mourn the ones you didn't marry. Sometimes, the wedding you didn't have is the luckiest thing that ever happened to you. Sophie stood up, slipped into a pair of flats. I've got an interview today, she said casually. Big-brained. They want to bring me on for a long-term collaboration. Wish me luck. I pulled her into a hug. You don't need luck, baby, I whispered. You're not waiting for green lights anymore. You're paving the road. She smiled, waved, and walked out the door. Not to someone else's house. Not to fulfill someone else's idea of settled. But forward. Into her own life. And in that moment I realized. Sophie didn't miss out on a marriage. She walked out of a trap. And straight into her freedom.